So 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation that really stopped me in my tracks. Sarah, a client who's a leadership consultant, she has 15 years experience. She told me, I have been researching how to start a podcast for 18 months. I've read dozens of articles. I've watched countless videos. I've bought equipment that's still in the box, but I still don't have a podcast. But then she said something that made me realize we have a serious problem in the expert community. She said, meanwhile, I keep seeing all these people, half my experience, building audiences and getting speaking gigs through their podcasts. I'm more qualified than they are, but they're the ones being heard. Well, that conversation forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. The experts who need to be podcasting are often the least likely to start. And the systems that we've created around podcasting are keeping the most valuable voices silent. So today, I'm sharing what I've learned from guiding dozens of experts through this exact transformation and why the barriers that you think exist probably don't.
Welcome to Fearless Podcasting Academy. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Dean. I've always lived in two worlds, one filled with the magic of storytelling and language, and the other wired with technology and innovation. And through the years of research and teaching and hands-on experience, I've been obsessed with one question: what makes a message truly resonate? And that's why I created the Fearless Podcasting Academy, where creators and entrepreneurs and change makers come to ditch self-doubt, amplify their voices, and build podcasts that demand attention. So whether you're launching your first episode or leveling up your platform, you're in the right place. Because when you learn to use your voice with confidence, you don't just start a podcast, you start a movement. This is Fearless Podcasting Academy.
Welcome back to Fearless Podcasting, the show that transforms experts into influential voices through the power of podcasting. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Dean. If you're new to the show, welcome. And if you've been following along with my recent content series on LinkedIn about expert podcasting, this episode ties everything together in a way that I hope will be both illuminating and actionable. Today's episode is different. So instead of interviewing a guest or diving into specific tactics, I'm pulling back the curtain on something much more fundamental: the patterns I see when experts transform from a quote-unquote someday podcaster to a confident host. But this is not just about observational data. This is about systemic barriers that keep expert voices marginalized and the specific process that breaks through them. Here's what I've discovered after working with dozens of experts across different industries. The podcasting world has created an artificial complexity that serves no one except those that are already in the know. What do I mean by that? I mean that most podcasting advice is designed for entertainment creators or lifestyle influencers, not for the experts who have knowledge to share. And that mismatch keeps brilliant voices silent, and less credible sources, they dominate the audio space. That's not just inefficient, that is fundamentally unjust. So today I am sharing what actually works for experts, the real transformation journey, the specific phases that every successful expert podcaster needs to go through. And yeah, I'll share exactly what happens inside my Fearless Launch Lab program for those who are ready for guided implementation. But most importantly, I want to challenge the narrative that podcasting is somehow mysterious or requires a special talent, because when we democratize access to media creation, we amplify voices that need to be heard. So let's start with what I call the expertise paradox. So here's something that might frustrate you. The people who need to be podcasting are often the least likely to start. I see this pattern constantly. A brilliant expert, someone with decades of experience, advanced degrees, proven results with clients, and they will tell me, I don't think I'm ready to start a podcast yet. Meanwhile, while someone with a fraction of their knowledge is already building an audience and claiming authority in that same space. This is what I call the expertise paradox. The more you know, the more aware you become of what you don't know, which paradoxically makes you less likely to share what you do know. But there's a deeper systemic issue here. The traditional media landscape has trained us to believe that having a platform requires permission from gatekeepers, that one-to-many model of media that we've grown up on. You need to be, quote unquote, chosen by a publisher or a network or a platform. Podcasting is different. It should be democratizing. It is democratizing. But somehow we've recreated the same gatekeeping mentality, but with different barriers. So instead of needing a media company to choose you, Now you have to navigate complex technical issues. You have to understand hosting platforms. You have to master audio editing and decode mysterious algorithms. The barriers have shifted, but they haven't disappeared. And here's the part that makes me absolutely fired up. These barriers aren't even real. Most of the complexity that keeps experts from podcasting is artificially constructed. The technical requirements are simpler than most people think, and the content creation process can be systemized. The growth strategies can be learned. There's an entire industry built around convincing you it's complicated. Expensive courses that promise to teach you all the secrets. Consultants who mystify simple processes. Equipment companies that suggest you need thousands of dollars of gear. It's gatekeeping disguised as expertise. So let me give you a specific example. Last month, I worked with Mark, this financial advisor that I talked about last week, who'd been researching podcasting launch strategies for 18 months. 18 months. When we had our first conversation, he told me, I just want to make sure I do this right. I've been studying different microphones, learning about compression settings, researching hosting platforms, and here's what happened when Mark finally launched. He used a $79 microphone, Hello Blue Yeti. He recorded in his home office, and he published his first episode using the most basic editing possible. That episode generated 3 consultation requests within 2 weeks. 18 months of research, guys, and 2 weeks to results. The expertise was already there. The voice was already valuable. The only thing missing was a system that eliminated the artificial complexity. That is what I mean by the expertise paradox. We've been conditioned to believe that sharing our knowledge requires mastering completely unrelated technical skills first. But here's the truth the podcasting industry doesn't want you to know. Your expertise is the hard part. Everything else is just process. And when you have the right process, the technical elements become background details, not roadblocks. And that brings me to the transformation phases I see with every expert who breaks through this paradox. 3 distinct phases that every successful podcaster goes through. And these aren't random, they're predictable, and understanding them can dramatically accelerate your own journey. The first one is the complexity overwhelm. This is where most experts start, and unfortunately, where many get stuck. So in this phase, you're convinced that launching a podcast requires mastering dozens of complex technical and strategic decisions. You research microphones for weeks, you watch YouTube videos about audio compression, you read blog posts about podcast hosting platforms. So the hallmark of phase 1 is that you're learning about podcasting instead of actually podcasting. You're consuming information instead of creating content. And here is the insidious part. This phase feels productive. You're learning, you're preparing, you're being responsible by doing your research. But it's a sophisticated procrastination. You're using preparation as a shield against the vulnerability of putting your voice into the world. And I know this because I lived in phase 1 for almost a year before launching my first podcast. Heck, I have a PhD. I lived in phase 1 for a very long time. I am a professional overthinker. I convinced myself that I needed to understand every aspect of the process before I could begin it. It was intellectual perfectionism disguised as professionalism. The breakthrough from phase 1 happens when you realize that podcast knowledge and subject matter expertise are completely different skill sets. You don't need to master audio engineering to share valuable insights about leadership or finance or marketing or whatever your field is. So phase 2 is the implementation breakthrough. This is where the magic happens. Phase 2 begins the moment you start focusing on your message instead of on your microphone. In this phase, you realize that podcasting is primarily a communication medium, not a technical medium. I'm going to say this again because so many people get stuck on the tech. In this phase, in the implementation breakthrough, you're going to realize that podcasting, it's just a communication medium. It is not a technical medium. The goal isn't perfect audio quality, it's clear value delivery. So Jennifer, she's a business strategist. She described her phase 2 breakthrough perfectly. She said, I stopped trying to sound like NPR and I started trying to sound like myself, having a valuable conversation. That mindset shift changes everything. Suddenly, equipment decisions became simple. What do you need to be clearly understood? You know your answer here? a decent microphone, and a quiet room. Content planning becomes straightforward. What questions do your ideal clients ask repeatedly? The answer to that becomes your episode topics. Technical processes become manageable all of a sudden. If you want to know how you edit efficiently, learn 3 basic techniques and stop trying to become a sound engineer. The experts who move quickly through phase 2 share one common trait. They focus on relentlessly serving their audience rather than impressing other podcasters. Again, I feel like I need to say this again. They focus relentlessly on serving their audience rather than impressing other podcasters. They ask better questions. So instead of saying, what's the best microphone, they ask, what's the minimum viable setup that allows me to deliver value clearly? So instead of asking, how do I grow my download numbers, they ask, how do I create content that truly helps my ideal client? Instead of, what advanced editing techniques should I learn, they ask, what's the simplest editing workflow that produces professional results? This phase typically lasts 2 to 4 weeks when you have proper guidance. Without guidance, you can get stuck here for months or even quit because you're making isolated decisions instead of following a proven system. Once you have that clear framework, all the decisions that you've been agonizing over become obvious. It's not about finding perfect solutions. It's about finding solutions that work for your specific situation and your goals. Okay, so phase 3 is the authority acceleration. This is where expert podcasters experience the transformation that makes all early effort worthwhile. Phase 3 typically lasts 4 to 6 weeks after launch, once you have specific episodes published and have established a basic rhythm. But the changes that you experience go far beyond having a podcast. First, there is the confidence transformation. When you start regularly articulating your expertise in long-form audio content, you become clearer about your own methodology, you develop better language for explaining complex concepts, and you start recognizing the unique value that you actually bring to your field. The experts who reach phase 3 consistently report that podcast listeners connect with them differently than other content followers. There's an intimacy to the audio medium that creates a deeper relationship faster. A potential client can reach out and say, I feel like I already know you from your podcast. And then third, there's the opportunity multiplication. Phase 3 experts start receiving speaking invitations. They have collaboration requests and media opportunities that they didn't actively pursue. The podcast becomes a credibility signal that opens doors. But here's what I find the most interesting about phase 3. The experts who reach it don't necessarily have the biggest audiences or the most polished production quality. They had consistency and they had clarity. So the financial advisor that I told you about earlier, he reached phase 3 with an average of 127 downloads per episode. But those 127 listeners included exactly the right people, his ideal listeners, other financial professionals, and potentially high-value clients. That authority acceleration happens because podcasting allows you to showcase the depth of your expertise in a way that no other medium can match. A LinkedIn post, for example, gives you 300 words. A blog article maybe gives you 1,500 words. And a podcast gives you 30 to 45 minutes of uninterrupted space to demonstrate how you think, how you solve problems, and how you serve your audience. That depth creates authority in ways that service-level content just can't. It literally can't. So here's the crucial point. These 3 phases are predictable and they're manageable when you have the right framework. Without proper guidance, experts often get stuck in phase 1 for months or even years. But with the right system, you can move through all 3 phases in 30 to 45 days, which is exactly why I created the process I'm about to share with you. So I've been getting questions about what actually happens inside Fearless Launch Lab. That's my 30-day podcast launch program for experts. So let me pull back the curtain and walk you through the exact process that takes you from overwhelmed beginner to confident podcaster. But first, let me explain why I structured it as a cohort-based program rather than something like a self-paced course. So after years of seeing experts struggle with solo podcast launches, I realized the problem was not lack of information. It was a lack of implementation support at critical decision points. You can watch 1,000 YouTube videos about microphone techniques, But when you're sitting in your office wondering if your first episode actually sounds professional enough to publish, you need real-time feedback from someone who's guided dozens of experts through that exact moment. That's what Fearless Launch Lab provides, expert guidance precisely when you need it the most. So in week 1, we have our strategic foundation. We start with strategy, not equipment, because most podcast failures happen long before technical problems even arise. They happen when experts launch without clarity about their unique positioning. So in our first group session, we work through what I call the expertise amplification framework. This is not generic podcast advice. It is specifically designed for established experts who need to translate their existing knowledge into compelling audio content. We answer questions like, how do you position your podcast to differentiate from the dozens of shows already in your space? What format best showcases your specific type of expertise? How do you create content that serves your audience while naturally demonstrating your authority? So by the end of week 1, you'll have a clear podcast concept that aligns with your business goals. You'll have a content framework that ensures that you never run out of valuable topics. You'll have your first 3 episodes outlined completely. And you'll have a technical setup plan customized to your specific needs and your specific budget. So what are we getting into in week 2? Technical implementation. And here's where we eliminate the complexity that keeps most experts stuck. So instead of trying to teach you everything about audio production, we focus on the minimum viable technical knowledge you need to produce professional results. No unnecessary complexity, no equipment you don't need, no advanced techniques that won't significantly impact your results. So our second group session covers the equipment selected based on your specific recording environment and budget. This is why we have small cohorts, because we actually want to look at your specific environment, your specific budget. We also look at recording techniques that ensure professional sound quality. We look at basic editing workflows that save time while maintaining that quality. And we look at file management systems that prevent technical headaches later, because let me tell you, if you throw it all into a Google Drive, you will not find it 2 years later. And I hope that you're still doing this 2 years later. The goal here is not to make you an audio engineer. It is to give you enough technical competence to focus on what matters, which is your content. So Rachel, who I mentioned earlier, she captured this perfectly. She said, I was terrified of the technical side, and I hear that so much. But this approach made it so straightforward. I realized that I had been overthinking something that could have been learned in 2 hours. And let me tell you, as a fellow professional overthinker, yes, that is exactly right. So by the end of week 2, you will have your complete recording setup tested and optimized. You will have your first episode recorded and edited. You will have a sustainable production workflow established, and you will have the technical confidence to focus on content creation instead of where you stick your mic. So in week 3, then we start looking at the content production mastery. That is where we optimize your content creation process for long-term sustainability. Anyone can do this for 30 days, right? Anybody. But can you do this for 2 years? Most experts start podcasting with enthusiasm, but burn out within a few months because they have not established efficient content systems. And I am guilty of this myself. Sometimes life happens, right? You move or you get sick or something happens and you miss some episodes because you have nothing in the can and nothing evergreen. Or you thought you had some extra interviews and you don't. If you have not established that efficient content system, when life happens, you will drop the ball and you will lose consistency. So our third session focuses on content planning systems that generate episode ideas effortlessly, interview techniques for guest episodes, and that if that's part of your format, batch production methods that fit into your existing schedule where you're not trying to make more work for you, and quality control processes that maintain standards without perfectionism. So this week, you're going to typically record 2 to 3 additional episodes, establishing a rhythm that works for your business schedule. So by the end of that week, you're going to have a sustainable content production system, multiple episodes completed and ready for launch, interview skills, and a workflow for interacting with that guest, and content planning systems for ongoing episodes. Then we get to week 4, launch strategy and amplification. So in our final week meeting together, we are going to focus on getting your podcast into the world strategically. This is not just about uploading episodes to a hosting platform. We create a comprehensive launch strategy that maximizes your initial visibility and establishes sustainable growth patterns. Our final session is going to cover distribution across all major platforms, show notes optimization for discoverability, social media amplification strategies, email marketing integration, and measurement and analytics that actually matter for expert podcasters. So by the end of that week, you are going to have your podcast live on all major platforms, a launch sequence that maximizes initial visibility, systems for ongoing promotion and growth, and an analytics setup that will measure what matters for your business goals. So throughout all these 4 weeks, you will have access to weekly 60-minute group coaching sessions with me, private online community for peer support and resource sharing that you also will get to have for the lifetime of the program. So you will have a cohort of alumni that you get to network and talk with afterwards. You will have Voxer support for urgent questions between sessions, a resource library with templates, checklists, and tools, and 30 days of post-launch email support. But here's what makes the biggest difference. You're not just getting information. You're getting personalized feedback at every critical decision point. So when you're unsure if your podcast concept is compelling, I provide specific guidance. So if you're worried about your audio quality, we troubleshoot together. When you're nervous about launching, the group provides encouragement and accountability. This is implementation support, not just information transfer, not just a solo course that you do on your own. We are a cohort. So the result is that in 30 days, you go from, I'm thinking about podcasting someday, to hosting a professional podcast that positions you as an authority in your field. Every expert who completes Fearless Launch Lab reports increased confidence in their professional messaging, because that goes beyond your podcast, and new opportunities that directly result from your podcast. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, okay, that sounds great and all, but can I really launch a professional podcast in 30 days while running my business? So let me answer that directly. The most common objection I hear from experts considering Fearless Launch Lab is about the time. I'm already overwhelmed running my business. How can I possibly add podcast creation to my schedule? And that is a valid concern. And if you approach podcasting the way most people do, researching equipment for weeks, watching endless YouTube tutorials, trying different editing software, experimenting with various strategies, it would indeed be overwhelming. But that is exactly why I designed Fearless Launch Lab, to eliminate the time-wasting elements that most people struggle with. So let me break down the actual time investment for you. In these weekly group sessions, these are 60 minutes. These are scheduled consistently so you can plan around them. Most experts find that blocking this time actually increases their overall productivity because it forces better time management for other tasks. Then we have individual implementation, which is about 2 to 3 hours a week. This includes recording, basic editing, and content planning. By week 3, most participants have streamlined this to under 2 hours per week because they've established efficient systems. Your total weekly investment, it's about 4 to 5 hours maximum. Now, let me put that in perspective, because I know you might be thinking right now, 4 to 5 hours, I do not have that a week. But how much time do you currently spend on marketing activities that generate uncertain results, or social media posting, or blog writing, or networking events, or cold outreach? So another client I worked with, her name is Carmen. She's a leadership consultant. She tracked her time before and after launching her podcast. She said, I spent 8 to 10 hours per week on various marketing activities with inconsistent results. And now I spend 4 hours per week on my podcast, and it generates more qualified leads than all my other marketing combined. But here is the time multiplier effect that most people don't consider. A single podcast episode becomes the foundation for multiple pieces of content. So every 30-minute episode I record generates 5 to 7 social media posts, 1 to 2 email newsletter segments, 1 blog article, multiple video clips, and countless conversation starters with prospects. So instead of creating separate content for multiple platforms, you create one piece of comprehensive content that gets repurposed across your entire marketing ecosystem. And we go over how to do that in this lab. So here's what I find most compelling about the time investment. Unlike most marketing activities that require ongoing effort for uncertain returns, podcast episodes continue generating value long after they're published. A LinkedIn post gets engagement for maybe 48 hours. A blog article might generate traffic for a few months, but podcast episodes continue attracting new listeners and generating opportunities 4 years. So when you're considering the time commitment, think about it as time invested rather than time spent. You're building an asset that continues generating returns long after the initial creation effort. But I'm going to be completely honest with you. If you're not willing to invest 4 to 5 hours per week for 30 days to build a professional platform for your expertise, podcasting probably isn't right for you. It may be interesting, but it may not be right. This isn't about finding time you don't have. It's about prioritizing the amplification of your expertise over less strategic activities. And if you're concerned about the time investment, consider this. How much time are you currently spending thinking about starting a podcast, researching equipment, reading articles about podcasting strategies, watching YouTube videos, heck, listening to this episode? Most experts I work with have already invested dozens of hours in podcast-related research. Fearless Launch Lab simply redirects that energy into actual implementation with expert guidance and cohort support. So we're at a choice point, both in this episode and in the larger conversation about expert voices in our culture. You can continue consuming content about podcasting while your expertise remains trapped in the limited reach of your current platforms. You can keep researching and planning and preparing while less knowledgeable voices claim the audio space in your industry. Or you can recognize that your expertise deserves to be heard and that waiting for that perfect moment is a luxury your audience can't afford. Every day that you delay launching your podcast is another day that your ideal clients are searching for answers that you could provide. Every week you spend getting ready is another week your competitors are building relationships with your potential audience. This isn't just about personal opportunity, though the business benefits of expert podcasting are substantial. It is about the collective loss that we all experience when authentic expertise remains unheard while less credible voices dominate the conversation. I have seen this pattern over and over and over. The experts who need to be podcasting are often the last ones to start, while those with less valuable insights jump in immediately and claim authority through volume rather than value. That is not just inefficient, it is harmful to everyone who could benefit from some real expertise. But here's what gives me hope. Every expert who breaks through that artificial barrier and shares their voice authentically creates permission for others to do the same. When you launch your podcast, you are not just building a platform for your expertise. You are demonstrating that expert voices can and should claim space in the audio landscape. Your expertise matters, your perspective is needed, and your voice deserves to be heard. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? So if you have been following my content about expert podcasting, you know that I've just opened enrollment for my June cohort of the Fearless Launch Lab. This is my premium 30-day podcast launch program, limited to 8 participants to ensure personalized attention and real implementation support. As I'm recording this episode, we have 5 spots remaining. Enrollment closes this Friday at midnight, and we begin Monday, June 3rd. So if you're ready to transform from a someday podcaster to confident host in just 30 days, if you are tired of watching others claim authority in your space while your expertise remains unheard, or if you want guided implementation instead of more information, this is your opportunity. You can secure your spot by visiting the link in the show notes or find the details in my LinkedIn profile. But I also recognize that some of you may still have questions about whether this is the right fit for your specific situation. If that's you, I'm offering 15-minute clarity calls this week for serious prospects. These are not sales calls. They're strategy sessions where we'll discuss your podcasting goals, address any concerns you have about the process, and determine where Fearless Launch Lab aligns with what you're trying to achieve. So if you'd like to schedule one of these clarity calls, simply send me a direct message on LinkedIn with the word clarity, and I will send you a booking link. Whether you join Fearless Launch Lab or you find another path to launching your podcast, please don't let another month pass without taking action. Your expertise deserves to be heard, and your audience is waiting. The audio space in your industry will not remain unclaimed forever. So before we wrap up, let me leave you with this thought. 6 months from now, you'll either have a professional podcast that positions you as an authority in your field, or you'll still be thinking about starting one day. The difference between those two outcomes is not talent, and it's not technical skill or even available time. It is the decision to stop consuming information about podcasting and start creating the content your audience needs. Your voice matters, your expertise is valuable, And the world needs more authentic expert voices, not fewer. Thank you for listening to the Fearless Podcast. If you have found value in today's episode, please share it with another expert who needs to hear this message. And remember, the best time to start sharing your expertise was 5 years ago. The second best time is now. Until next time, this is Dr. Stephanie Dean encouraging you to be fearless with your voice.